Welcome everyone to Rising Out of the Chrysalis Stories That Inspire with Marissa Grace, where we share life stories of struggle and triumph, not only of my own life experiences, but also through the experiences of my own guests, as a way to help you have breakthroughs and find hope in your own life.
Welcome, everyone, and I want to welcome to the show today Sara Phillips. Welcome.
Thank you, Marisa. It's very good to be here today.
Likewise. So, Sara, you have a very painful story, um, but one that ends up in a very beautiful note. And before we dive into it, Sara, I want you to kind of take us back in time into your early childhood. Kind of give us like an idea of what it was like when you were little, growing up. Um, uh, Give us kind of the background of your family, and so we kind of have an insight of what that was like early on in your
Yeah,
life.
yeah. I was or am the youngest of 8 kids in my family. There were 4 boys and 4 girls. Um, Unfortunately, my father was a raging narcissist. If you have never experienced one, they are you don't live with them, you experience them. And as a result, he was very abusive. My childhood was one of really every kind of abuse you can possibly imagine, mentally, physically, emotionally, sexually, spiritually, financially. There was no part of my life that was not affected by different forms of abuse. Everything from, calling me a fat, lazy, worthless little bitch to, you name it. It was just all there. And, it was pervasive throughout the house. It wasn't just me. I was the baby. I probably, ironically, got the least of the abuse of those in the family, but it certainly doesn't mean that it was not profound. He was abusive to both my mother and all of my siblings as well.
Now, does this go back to as early as you remember? Did it start like later on in your childhood, or?
He was always that way. Of course, being a small child, there's very little that I remember. The things that I have learned in the intervening years have been, my family is related to me, but obviously it was profound on me even when I was young, because I can remember my mother telling me that when I was a little girl, 8, 10 months old, that if they left me alone in the room with my father, she said, you would scream like somebody was murdering you. Like you literally could not be left alone with your father. And obviously that was terror, you know. So yeah, it's
Absolutely.
it
That's
it
very common. Children will respond, um, you know, from the time they're babies, right, to their environment. And if they feel in danger, um, they will reflect that. So describe a little bit like about, when you say he was, mentally, verbally abusive, what were some of the things that you've experienced that you were able to share? um, as a child.
Oh wow, what what did not I experience? Like I said, it was my father expected, no, he demanded perfection in everything. And, if you didn't produce perfect results, it was you got one of several punishments, as he would call them. It was either that he beat you with a belt. Sometimes it was like literally hitting with fists and kicking and those types of things. You would be cut off from the ability to socialize with anybody. He would put you on restrictions and you weren't allowed to see anybody. Those were bad. The worst though was the mental, because almost always they resulted in anywhere from about 2 to 5 hours of being berated, told how stupid we were, how worthless we were, that we were lazy, he was embarrassed to have us as children, we were worthless, and it was just repeated over and over and over and over and over again for hours and hours and hours. So yeah.
Did anybody ever intervene during that time, like neighbors, family members? Was anybody else like aware that this behavior was not, normal, that they were aware that you guys were being subjected to this type of stuff?
Interesting that you would say that, because the word normal to us, what we were living in was normal. It was all we knew. We thought everybody lived that way. So we certainly never told anybody, not that we would have dared to anyway, because they would have beat the shit out of us. Um, but he was the classic narcissist. The whole world thought he was perfect. Oh, your dad's so wonderful. He's so funny. He said, everybody just thought he was the greatest human being that ever lived, unless they lived in the house with him. There were times when interventions were attempted. My mother um, would try to step in, and he just beat her too. Um, my brother, one time, he beat my sister, and my brother found out about it, came to the house, and when he came in to confront my father, my dad pulled a gun on him. And so yeah, that was kind of what happened to you when you tried to intervene. So you learn to stay in your own lane and not step in.
Of course, and that's normal, right? Because we tend to take the precautions that are going to keep us safe, and that's okay. If we confide, we follow the rules, then we'll be safe. And there's always that worry that he might kill one of us, right? Um,
Absolutely.
I understand because I grew up with a narcissistic abusive dad as well, who was verbally and physically abusive. And um, we just didn't know, come home from school, is today going to be a good day or a bad day? Is he going to be the normal father, like a normal person behaving, laughing, or is he all hell's going to break loose? Um, and interesting, I found that we lived in an apartment building. The neighbors were so scared that nobody ever dared to call for help or even come and help any of us,
Mhm.
because they felt threatened. They felt like he would come after them.
Mhm.
And, after many years interviewing my mom, I'm like, why did you allow this? And why were you subjected to all this abuse? And, it all came down to fear that, well, if I ever call the cops, or he would come out and kill me.
Yeah.
If I ever did anything, I knew he was gonna come after me and kill me, and that was her greatest fear. So she allowed herself and us to be subjected to mental and physical abuse for so long out of fear.
Yes. Yes. That was
And
absolutely, and not just physical fear on my mom's part. Um, because being the narcissist he was when she first met him, she didn't know she was from England, and they met. She got pregnant, and that she came to the States with him. And she said, literally within 2 weeks after we landed, I had realized who he was. And I picked up all my stuff, and I was like, I'm taking my kids and I'm leaving. And keep in mind that this was back in the 1960s. She didn't know the laws. This was a whole new country to her. She didn't understand what was going on. And he said, go ahead. You can leave anytime you want to. Leave your kids. And she was like, no. And he said, you can go anytime you want to go, but when you leave, I'm keeping your children. she was like, "You can't do that." And he said, "Oh, yeah, I can. Because I've got 50 guys on the military base that'll swear you've been sleeping with them. You're an unfit mother, and you'll never get custody of your children." And she knew that he would do something like that because the children from his first marriage he had custody of because he had his wife committed to a mental institution so he could get them. So, she lived not only in physical terror of him, but also the threat of losing her children. So it was like she had no way out. She was as much a victim of everything as we were.
Absolutely. And did you find that being a child of so many siblings, did you guys support each other, or did you find that everybody was kind of like on their own trying to figure it out?
No, we were definitely, we had each other's backs. It's funny to me. I watch children now and, I'm going to go tell mom or I'm going to tell dad on you. It was a firm rule in our house. You didn't tell mom and dad anything because who knew, that might be the day that he goes crazy because you dropped a pencil, so you didn't tell him anything. And we protected one another, that um, we were each other's protectors. We were also each other's best friends because as a narcissist is want to do, he kept us isolated from the rest of the world. We didn't have anybody outside the house. It was our whole universe. We were allowed to talk to people at school. We could go visit a friend for a couple of hours twice a week. But other than that, we were all in the house together. So yeah, it created a bond and a dynamic in our family where we were almost inseparable.
Now, how did that affected you in school growing up?
I was the best student you could ever want because I realized that if I behave, my mind said, okay, if you behave yourself and you do really good in school and you do what you're supposed to do and you clean the house and you do all this stuff, then maybe he won't get mad today.
Mm.
So I learned to be the perfect, when I describe it in my book, I, I describe it as being the perfectly trained dog. I did whatever I was supposed to do on command so that I was less abused than the rest of the children.
But with that came consequences.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I had um in order to do that, I had to shut myself off from my own feelings and emotions. It's such an odd dynamic. Um, one of the things that I learned, I've always been overweight, and I have learned that part of that was because I was trying to protect myself physically, but the other part was I was trying to protect myself emotionally.
Mhm.
I literally created all these barriers and walls that kept everybody out. Um, I literally did not feel like, first of all, the world was not a safe place. And I could literally trust no one other than myself. Even though I knew my siblings had my back, I still didn't trust them completely. I didn't trust anybody. And I didn't trust my own body. Like, because of the sexual abuse, I felt like my own body had betrayed me. And it, I literally cut off physical sensation from my body. I don't feel pain, physical pain, the way that the average person does because I learned, I can remember my father would beat us with a belt and we'd cry and he'd say, now stop crying before I give you something to cry about. And I can remember thinking, well, what was that?
Like you're not
But
able to do anything. You can't cry, you can't express emotion. You're
yeah,
literally like shutting you down to the core.
yep. And so as a result of that, my subconscious mind said, oh, well, that must not hurt. So the more it happened, the less it hurt because my mind, your subconscious mind is an incredibly powerful tool. And so it literally learned that that didn't hurt, so that I didn't feel pain the way that other people feel pain. To the point that, I was like 27, and I ended up being rushed into emergency surgery because I had a 14-pound cyst on my ovary that had twisted and turned gangrenous and was life threatening at that point. And after the surgeon was finished, he came in the next day and he was like, "Why didn't you get this taken care of before it got to this point?" I said, "Didn't know I had it." I will never forget the look of shock on his face. He was like, "How can you not know that you have a 14-pound cyst on your ovary? Didn't it hurt?" And I'm like, "Nope, didn't feel a thing. Never felt a thing."
No, your body was numb. It was numb from so much pain, right? That
Yep.
you've endured all those years. And, that's interesting that you say that, you felt like your body failed you. Um, with my experience, I felt that there was something wrong with my body, and that's why it attracted those experiences to me. And I felt like, okay, if I didn't look the way I looked, or there must be something wrong with the way I look or with my body, and that's why these bad things happen.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, we start, because as children, we're trying to justify, what is it that why are we experiencing these things? So we always go to, well, then there must be something wrong with me. I
Yep.
must be the one with the defect. And this is why we never, as we go through the experience, we never blame the person that's actually doing the harm. We always tend to blame ourselves. Uh,
Yeah.
you know,
It's fascinating to me. Again, like I said, it is the human subconscious is such an incredible tool that, yeah, like you say, it is obviously I've done something wrong. That it can't possibly be. The one thing that I've learned in this journey is that we create our own reality. And when I say that, most people go, "Oh yeah, you can create whatever future you want." I'm like, "No, you don't understand. The reality we create happens in the moment. It is when someone does something to us because of the filter that we see. I always tell people it's like having, if I put on a pair of green tinted glasses right now, you and everything around me would appear to be green. But if I take them off and I put yellow glasses on, now everything looks yellow. Did the situation around me change at all? No. What changed was the way that I see it. So it was because even at that young age, you and I were both looking at the world through the wrong lens. And we will find evidence to support whatever our belief system is.
mhm,
If I believe that there is something wrong with me, then everything that happens to me is going to support that concept that there
absolutely.
is something wrong with me. If I believe that I am fat, then everything around me is going to support that. So yeah, we live in this world that other people have poured their pain, their misery, their self-hatred into us and changed the lens through which we see the world.
That is absolutely right. But not only that, we've already came into this world damaged. So I'm sure as you went through this healing journey and reflected back, you found evidence that even before you were born, while you were in your mother's womb, you were already being subjected to that trauma. You were already
Yep.
picking up your mother's trauma.
Yep.
So at this point, being the youngest child, she's been subjected through this abuse over and over again. She's now, inherently given it to you through her DNA and her cells. So as a baby, you're there in that belly experiencing this pain, this self of unworthiness that, I'm not worthy to be here, I'm unlovable. Then you come out into the world and there's all your evidence to support it, and more evidence over and over, which is exactly what I've experienced. Now, if we don't have anyone or anything that's going to show us something different, we will not know anything different than that experience.
Yeah, very true. And it's funny, that is an aspect that I had not previously thought of. So thank you for sharing that with me. The fact that, yeah, my mother was going through all of this trauma while she was pregnant with me. So obviously, I experienced that when I was still in the womb. So yeah, thank you. I get to go and spend some time thinking about that because yeah, I had
Oh,
not even considered
absolutely.
that.
Not only did you any time during that childhood experience have any time with anyone outside of this family dynamic? Like for me, I am so grateful that I ended up living with my grandparents for a good part of my childhood, which gave me a different perspective of what a family dynamic could look like, different from the one I was experiencing with my parents. So I was able to find that there is love, there is a different type of relationship I could have. And that, I had something to compare it to. Now, did you have any of that type of experience?
I did not. My father was very much one to keep us in the house, isolated. Um, I had friends, but for whatever reason, the friends that I chose also lived in complete dysfunction. So, yeah, their shit might have looked different, but it was still shit,
Yeah.
So, yeah, I didn't, there was no, there was no bright spot. It was what it was. This is the world that you live in. And so, it shaped everything. It shaped everything that one of the things, and why I'm bringing this up, I don't know, other than Holy Spirit told me to, but, um, when you're young, especially when you're a young girl, you always dream of growing up and marrying the Prince Charming and live happily ever after. And I never, ever had that fantasy. Never. Because my experience of marriage was that your husband beat you, he berated you, he belittled you. And then my oldest sister, she was 12 years older than me, and she was basically my mother. Um, eh, eh, you know, for all intents and purposes, she was the one who took care of me. She bathed me, she fed me, she did everything for me. And when she was 16, so I was 4, she ran away from home to get away from my father. She ended up marrying a man who beat her every single day. And, you know, she divorced him finally. She married a man who verbally abused her every day. My other sister got married to, you know, a man that was a perpetual Peter Pan. He still hasn't grown up. He's 65. I love him, but he's Peter Pan. She divorced him, married a narcissist, exactly like my father. You know,
Because that's all that was
every,
familiar to them. This is all they know. They
yeah,
didn't know any other relationship. They probably didn't even know a different type of relationship existed, right? It,
yeah,
it definitely didn't exist in your reality.
yeah. And my brothers were the exact same kinds of husbands. So it was like, no, I don't, I have zero desire to be married. Why would I want to do something like that? Why would I want to get married? Who in their right mind would want to grow up and be involved in something like that? And spiritually it affected me terribly. I always loved and believed in God. But being raised Southern Baptist, although we didn't go to church, we were raised with the concepts. I don't know if you've ever been to a church in the South, but most of them, when you walk through the door, what you hear about is a God who is going to judge you, demands perfection, and if you're not perfect, he's going to punish you and send you to hell for eternity. No thanks. Not really somebody I want to have a relationship with. And the few places that I went that wasn't the message was, he's your heavenly father. Well, my experience with the word father was not a good one. And I'm like, yeah, I don't need another one of those either. Thank you. So even though I loved him and I wanted him in my life, I didn't trust him.
Because he's a male, and the male figure represented the only male figure you ever had in your life, which was a very negative experience. I have
Yeah.
to say that I probably have that same outlook on God or Jesus for a very long time. I was more connected with the Virgin Mary because she was female and she was motherly until, the last few years that changed, that outlook changed. Um, but I knew the reason why, and it was because that represented, the male, which at the time that relationship with a male represented everything that was negative. And
Mm-hmm.
that affected my relationships. And um, I'm sure that, to you as well. So tell me how that affected you with having any type of relationship as you grew older.
Oh, um, did I have that? um, I had five, for the want of a better word, relationships in my life. First one was when I was like 12, and I was a boy in the neighborhood, and he spent his whole time telling me about his ex-girlfriend and how he still liked her and whatever. So I spent my entire life trying to live up to being worthy of him wanting to spend time with me as opposed to her. Um, that lasted for about a year. And after that, really the only things that you could call a relationship was, and at the time I called them relationships. Now I look back on it and realize that what they were was guys that I was attracted to, that I had some conversations with, and we had sex over an extended period of time. There was no, there was no emotional connection. Um, there was no dating, there was no hand holding, there was no kissing, cuddling, none of that. None of that. It
Because that
was,
was not familiar to you. Did
yeah,
I didn't grow up with a family that hugged or cuddled or kissed.
yeah,
Um, but from the sexual trauma which you've experienced, that left a very also the physical trauma in the body itself. So any like hugging or kissing was not only foreign, but it was very traumatic to the body.
yes, yeah. Like literally, just like someone just kind of walking by and putting their hand on my shoulders created a reaction in me that should never have been there. But because my body had been violated from earliest childhood, since as early as I can remember, um, my mind said that is how people should, that is how men show you love. So it was really weird. It created this dynamic in me of, on the one hand, being having this absolute aversion to being violated. But at the same time, my mind equated sex and love in such a way that, if someone loves you, they have sex with you. If they don't have sex with you, then they can't love you. So it's almost like in my mind, the sex created love. And so as a result, I was very promiscuous because I was trying to find somebody that, okay, if I do this, they'll love me. And, of course, that didn't work. And the odd thing is that people who have that level of deviance in them, um, they are absolute. It's almost like they have a freaking radar. They can spot you a
Mhm.
mile away, and it's like they will prey on you. And I put on all this weight during my life. It's part of it was to protect me physically from the beatings. Part of it was to protect me emotionally from um, the kids at school don't pick on you when you're bigger than them. They just don't.
Right.
But it also was served as a protection, so that, because my subconscious figured out that, hey, people are less attracted to people who weigh more. So if I weigh more, I won't have to deal with these men who are trying to prey on me.
And you
Unfortunately,
won't
that
be
doesn't
hurt.
work either.
No,
Because they could care less what you look like. They are just looking for a victim.
absolutely. And that is interesting that you say that because I think energetically, because we are energetic beings, and whatever emotionally, whatever we are experiencing inside of us does give out a radar signal and it attracts that same thing back to us. So, it seems like, oh, the men kind of just know they pick up the signal. Yeah, they are picking up your energetic signal that you are hurt. And that's why, they can sense and psychology, and we could see it over and over again how predators prey on children that are damaged, right? They can just pick up and sense. They pick up on that energetic signal and they just know exactly what child to go towards and pick on them. And that's because we are radiating that energy signal of hurt, of pain, and we are
Yep.
attracting that same thing back to us. But we don't know it, right? We don't know. Nobody, back then, there was not as much knowledge that we have now um, about, you know, the things that we are feeling, we also attract. Had we known, had we had those resources, we probably wouldn't have suffered as much, right? But also, interesting, do you think because of that, that contributed to the cyst that was growing inside of you? Did you ever make any connections between why did I have this experience of having the cyst in my ovaries?
I've never thought about that. Um, but yeah, there probably was a connection, because one of the things that I learned through my story was that we are, the Bible says that we are created in God's image. And when I was young, I used to think that meant we look like Him. As I have gone through the journey, what I have realized is that when you look back in Genesis, it said, God said it and then it happened, and He said it and it happened. God created everything. And when He created us in His image, what He created was the ability to co-create the universe with Him. That we literally control within us the ability to create the universe the way that we choose to create it. And, coming from that abusive childhood, and I'm sure you probably picked up that when I said that my sister was basically my mom, my mother and I, although I loved her dearly, she was not emotionally available. Now, through the years, I found out that she was also sexually abused, which, makes complete sense why she was disconnected from her own children and all of those things. Um, but I desperately wanted to be with her, to spend time with her, and I didn't get that. So, the two things that I wanted most in the world was to be safe, mainly from my father, and love, mainly in the form of attention from my mother. And when I was 8 years old, I created exactly that. I got hit by a car. And I was in the hospital for a month. Well, my father wasn't going to show me his rage in the hospital because then other people would be exposed to it, and he's not going to have that. And my mother came and sat with me for hours and hours and hours, just me and her every day. So I literally created a situation that would give me exactly what it was that I wanted. And I didn't put that together until just a few years ago. But, that is the reality, that we have that ability. So, yes, it's very possible that there's a connection between who I was or what I was trying to create in the universe and creating that cyst on my ovary. Ironically, as I said, my mother was also sexually abused. She had a cyst on the same ovary at the same age.
Wow,
So I found that fascinating. Yeah.
that is fascinating. Is your mom or dad still here, or have they departed?
No,
They still
they both passed away. My father's been gone for about 30 years, my mom 4 years. Yeah.
now after, have you at any point been able to kind of have any conversations with your mom, after, as adults, and kind of reflect back on the experiences that you've had?
A few. We did. She lived with me until she died. I took care of her. She got lung cancer, and I took care of her until she died. And she was my best friend when I was an adult. We traveled the world together. We did everything together. And it wasn't until after she died that I realized that, because the sexual abuse that I remember was my sister's first husband. It was not until after she died that I came to terms with the fact that my father also sexually abused me, and she walked in and saw it and turned around and walked back out again. Um, so, there's a lot of healing that gets to come from around that as well. But while she was alive, we would discuss it somewhat. She would explain to me, why she made the decisions that she made. And quite honestly, she um she literally blocked out a lot of it. When my father had a stroke, and he turned into an even bigger jerk than he was to start with, which I didn't even know was possible, but he did. And he was in the rehab hospital and was getting ready to come home. And I said to my mom, I think we really need to put him in a nursing home. And she said, why? And I said, because he's dangerous. And she said, he's not dangerous. And I'm like, what? And she said, Sarah, I know he was, tough or whatever, but he never hit anybody. I was like, what house were you in? you know? And I was like, okay, you get to talk to David, who was the oldest boy. So he had the most memories. Um, you get to talk to him about who Dad was, but just brace yourself, because you're going to hear some things that you don't want to hear. And so he went back and he told her, who my dad really was. The time that my dad beat him, and because David wouldn't cry, he hit him in the head with a hammer. I mean, this was the man that you live with. But it was so painful for her to watch not only herself go through it, but to watch her children be exposed to that she literally just blocked it off. So her ability to talk with me about those things was very limited, because she just walled them off like they didn't happen. It was the only way she could deal with it.
Yeah, that was the only way she could survive through it, right? Being
Yep.
exposed to that severe type of trauma, and,
Yep.
and being a witness to all her children going through it.
Yep.
I could only imagine, right? You'd have to black it out and tell
Yeah.
yourself, I don't want, and this happens quite often, and I see it over and over again, where um we go through some type of trauma and we tell ourselves, I don't want to remember. And
Mm-hmm.
then they're like, I just want to remember my doctor's appointments, and I can't remember the grocery list. I can't remember. I'm like, well, here's the reason why you've chosen to block this pain, but you don't realize, like you said before, Sarah, how powerful your subconscious mind is, that your subconscious mind says, all right, you want to block everything out? We're going to block everything out.
Yep.
I'm not going to let you remember anything.
Yep.
And this way, you'll be protected and you'll be able to survive on this planet.
Yep.
And it's not until, you get to a certain point in your life that you start realizing, oh, what an impact that had. I didn't know I could do that.
Yeah. How powerful you truly are is absolutely amazing, when you come to understand how much power you actually hold in the world. You know,
Absolutely.
we tend to think of ourselves, especially when you come through abuse and things like what we've experienced, that you definitely have this feeling of I don't have any control, and without realizing that we are infinitely powerful. We just have allowed ourselves to either not access it or not be aware of it.
We are fooled to believe we don't have that power.
Yes.
Now, incredibly, you're able to turn this around and go on this incredible journey of healing and realizing um, that you can rewire yourself and heal yourself from all this trauma. So tell us more about how did this healing journey come about? What was the turning point in your life?
Um, well, I wish I could say that there was just this one magical moment and I did this one thing and it turned everything around and life was good. And, that doesn't work that way. So it was a long series. It's like 33. So I think I started healing when I was 23. And it started with a book. I was at a girlfriend's house and her mom was trying to give one of our other friends this book called The Courage to Heal. It is about adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse. And our other friend kept saying, I don't need that. I don't need that. I don't know why you always think I was abused. I wasn't abused, blah, blah, blah. I had never told anyone, no one. And I remember really quietly saying, can I borrow that book? And everybody in the room just turned around and looked at me in shock because it was the first time I had ever given anybody a peek into that closet. And so I took that book and I read it cover to cover in one day. And holy cow, all of a sudden I realized that it wasn't just me. I wasn't crazy. It wasn't my fault. I was responding the way that everybody responds to, well, not everybody, but most people respond to that type of trauma and abuse. And so it's like it opened up a whole new world to me. And I took the book back and it was like the way I always think about it is I peeked in the closet, saw the monster in there, slammed the door and ran like hell. Like, I don't want to deal with this anymore. That's why did I? So for the next probably 10 years, nothing. And then there was this friend of mine who worked at the health department and he knew what happened to me and he started encouraging me to see a therapist. Well, when you grow up in a home where you don't ask anybody for help ever, that was a hard pill for me to swallow, but I finally did. And I started going and I, went for about a year and okay, yeah, things got a little bit better and but then I moved. And now, the normal thought that you would think is if something's working, you keep doing it. No, no, no. I was like, okay, well, I'm good now. I'm good. So, I ran away again and it's probably another 10 years before I had another friend who realized my brokenness. Um, and in the meantime, by the way, I was reading books. I was going to, anything I could read on it, any workshop, stuff like that, I would go to. But Um, he finally convinced me to go back to therapy, and I went, and I didn't like her. After 2 sessions, I quit. I did it again. I did it a third time. Finally, I'm like, I'm done. I'm done. The therapists are all full of crap. I don't like any of them. I'm not. And he was like, no, you don't get to give up on this. So you get to call social services and find somebody who is a PTSD specialist, because that was my diagnosis. And I found one, and she has been amazing. Um, she and I have worked together. We have worked through more crap, and she makes me laugh all the time because, it takes me 10 years to get to something. And I'm like, how long have you known that? She's like, yeah, pretty much since you walked in the door. but you had to find that.
Yeah.
Like my father sexually abusing me. When I finally had that breakthrough moment, I was in her office, and I'm like, did you know that? And she was like, yeah. I said, how long have you known? She said, yeah, pretty much since you came in my office the first time. You just had to be ready, and you couldn't do that while your mother was alive. So, I go through this series, and I'm taking antidepressants, and I went to workshops, and I went to, oh, I can't even tell you, there's so many different things. And, the moral of all of that is that if you're on this journey to healing, don't assume that, okay, I did this one thing, why aren't I fixed? Because it doesn't work that way. I wish it
No.
did. I wish there was an easy button. There's not an easy button.
No, there is no easy button. We have to take into consideration all the years. It's not just the years that you were directly subjected to the trauma itself, it's even the years afterwards that
Yeah,
you carry the trauma with you. So all those years, you've added layers and layers and layers of crap, one on top of the other. You can't just take that off. It's like you have a big wound on your leg. You can't just take the bandage off,
yeah,
and expect that wound now to just heal by itself. You have to slowly, you know, um, take care of that bandage, right? There's the
right,
layers and layers and layers, so that the healing can go smoothly, and the healing, the wound just doesn't go away overnight. It slowly starts, closing in and healing itself until the only thing that's left is that scar, the memory. But
exactly.
it takes time. It takes time of dealing with each layer, and it may take different modalities to get there as
Yep,
well. It's not just one thing, it's many different things. Just like many different things contributed to the trauma. It wasn't just the one thing, it wasn't just one event,
yep.
right? It was hours, days, years.
Years and years and years, and yeah, you know, there are so many. And the one thing that I have figured out as I have watched this unfold in my life is that you know it's layers. It's like peeling an onion. You take the layer off, and you're like, oh, this is a nice smooth layer, and then you realize that, crap, that's not smooth either. So you find something else to go through to the next layer with. And so, uh, God, 33 years, I'm like peeling layer, 32 years, peeling, 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 peeling. And then my miracle came. So I got to get back to my childhood to explain to you what the miracle was, in the present day. When I was growing up, my older brother, Michael, he was my hero. He was, although I had four older brothers, he was my protection. He was my safe person. And so I obviously spent a lot of time with him growing up. And he's 8 years older than me, but he was still my buddy. And him and his best friend, James, were constantly at my house. James was like a part of our family. So me and Michael and James and my brother Bobby were forever doing things together. Um, and of course, we grew up, being 8 years older than me. Michael moved out of the house. James went in the Air Force. Life moved on. And then when I was 16, James came and knocked on the door, and I saw him there. And of course, I was happy to see him. And I was like, "Hey," I said, "Michael doesn't live here anymore, but I can give you his address where he's at." And he said, "I can come to see him. I came to see you." I was like, "Oh, okay." Friend of the family coming home, seeing everybody. So he came in, and we went to go shoot darts. We were always playing darts, and I can see this as plainly as if it happened 2 seconds ago. I was sitting on the dryer and he was holding it, he was shooting, and he had the last dart in his hand, and he stopped and he looked at me and he said, "I came home to tell you something." And I said, "Okay." He said, "I've been waiting for you to be old enough to tell you this, but I'm in love with you. Will you marry me?" You've heard the expression, "You could knock me over with a feather." Well, it would not have taken a feather. A speck of dust would have been sufficient to knock me off that dryer. I had no clue that he had any thoughts of me as anything other than Michael's kid sister. So simultaneously, several things were going on in my mind. Number one was I had no freaking clue you even thought about me in that respect. And number two was because of the sexual abuse, my assumption was that all men wanted sex. That's all they wanted. And so I assumed he wanted to get laid. That was the whole purpose in doing this. So I did what my subconscious mind was so good at doing. I started throwing up barriers left and right. I'm too young. My dad would kill me. You're in the military. I'm not going to Germany. I'm going to college. I'm going to do everything I could think of to push him away. And so he accepted that and he left, and I never saw him again. And remember that we find evidence for what we believe. And my belief was that I was unlovable and he wanted to get laid. And him leaving and never coming back was evidence of both of those things. So, and I never held it against him. I mean, all men wanted sex from me. That was, it wasn't something I was angry or hurt about. I just, okay, that is what it is. So, fast forward 40 years, my brother Michael decides to show me that he's not the Superman that I always thought he was. He had a stroke. He had a pretty severe stroke, and he lost a lot of his memories. So I went to visit him one day, and me and he and his wife were sitting around the house laughing about stuff we did when we were kids, and I was laughing about some of the stuff that he and James used to do when we were growing up. And his wife all of a sudden said, "Where is James?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I haven't seen James in 40 years." He said, "Because he didn't have a Facebook page." I'm like, I can't. She said, "I just think it'd be good for them to talk. Maybe it'd help Michael with his memories." I'm like, I wish I could tell you, but I don't have a clue. So I went home. 3 days later, I'm going online to buy something on Amazon. And for only the second time in my life, something happened that I used to, when people would tell me this happened to them, I thought they were crazy. I really did. I thought they had lost their freaking minds. But I heard God's voice. And he said, "Google James." Huh? Google James. All right. So I did. Ended up finding, where he was, and got a phone number for him. And so I called him to give him Michael's phone number, tell him what had happened, give him Michael's phone number, try and connect the two of them. So of course, when we got on the phone, we're catching up, who's married, blah, 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 whatever. He's married, got 2 kids. What everybody in my family was doing. And he said, "What about you?" And I said, "Nope, never got married, never had kids." And he went, "Really?" And I thought, well, that's an odd response to that statement, but okay, whatever. And we went on talking. We got ready to get off the phone, and I was like, "Okay, well, can I text him? Can I text his number to you?" And he said, "To this number." And he said, "No." He said, "I don't have a cell phone." He said, "This is the landline, but you can text it to my wife and she'll get it to me." Okay, not a problem. So I was like, "It was so good to talk to you again, James. I think about you all the time." And he said, "Yeah, me too." And I still can't say that without crying. Because in that moment, what I heard was, not only did I love you when you were 16, after all these years, I'm still in love with you. And I got off the phone and I realized that if he loved me, then I was lovable. And if I was lovable, it was okay for me to love myself. And most importantly, if I was lovable, it means that I could let God love me. And those three words literally changed everything that I've ever seen, heard, or believed in my lifetime. It was like God took me out of one world and stuck me in a different one. And like I said, we find evidence for what we believe. And the image that God has given me for this is this little girl sitting next to this giant toy box. And she's taking out all the toys inside, looking at them, and realizing that it was a different toy than she ever thought it was. And that the toy I thought it was never existed. So in that came 6 months of me re-examining literally everything that ever happened to me and understanding that the person that I thought I was all of my life never existed. And that I was a completely different human being than I even realized that I was, because I was hiding the real me even from myself. And so it began a journey of learning to tip it.
Rediscovering of who you truly are.
Yeah, I tell people that, those three words started three love stories in my life. It was the love story with myself, the love story with a significant other, and a love story with God. And I came to understand that my self-image didn't come from what somebody else thought about me. It didn't even come from what I thought about me. That truly who I am comes from what God thinks I am. And learning to live a life where I live in faith. I live on the promises that He made me and continues to make to me. It's learning to communicate with Him. It's learning to open myself up and hear the messages and follow the trail of breadcrumbs that He has laid out so that I can become what He has created me to be in the first place. And
That's
that
beautiful.
all of these things that happened to me happened for a reason. It didn't happen in a vacuum. It wasn't, oh, well, poor Sarah, she's lived this terrible broken life. No, it was so that, because by trade, I'm a teacher. Um, one of the things that I've always known about teaching is that you have to understand your subject matter at a level that's about 20 times deeper than you're ever going to teach it, because you have to understand all the nuances that come around it, and the fact that different people are going to struggle with different parts of it and all of those things. And I've realized that that's what my journey has been, because my calling because one of the gifts that God gave me from the time I was very young was I have this ability to see the greatness in other people that they can't see in themselves. And what He's called me into is using that gift and the experience of my journey so that I understand the pain that other people have gone through, so that I can assist them in okay, here's how we take it to the next level. Here's how we go to the next step, and assisting them in their healing as well.
That is beautiful. And yes, it's very well said. And I do believe in that, it's almost like we live this illusion, that part of our lives, an illusion that we end up believing to be true. And then we come to this point in our lives that we realize that that was just an illusion,
Yeah,
something that was created so we can learn from that experience at a very deep level
yeah,
so that we can, it not only shapes us into who we are becoming, but it teaches us lessons that we wouldn't have otherwise have learned.
yeah,
It teaches us
actually,
strength, the depth of love, because now you can measure love.
yeah.
You
And
can
I have
measure,
realized that it is the most powerful force in the universe. There is nothing that is more powerful than love. Nothing.
absolutely. And, the power of forgiveness as well, of letting go, which is very difficult for so many, but yet so vital, so important for the healing journey.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. As a matter
Sarah,
of fact, I just got to that point with my dad the other day. I woke up and God just put it in my heart. He was like, it's time to forgive him. It's time to forgive him. He was operating. You now understand how you operated a life out of your pain and
hmm
your betrayal. And you get to understand that that's all he was doing too. He had experienced his own pain, his own betrayal. He did the best he knew how with what he was given. And you get to know that even though it was a very bizarre outcome, that he did what he did because he loved you and he wanted you to grow up to be a good adult. And the process that he used sucked, but you get to forgive him because as long as you hold on to the hurt in your own heart and the anger at him, you're still his victim.
hmm
You're choosing to be his victim every single day.
that is very true. So a lot of us think that by holding on to that pain, that we will seek vengeance, right? We'll get to, there's going to be some payback at some point. But what we're not realizing is it's not up to us, number one, to seek vengeance or to do any type of payback. All we're doing is destroying ourselves even further. We're extending that trauma even further. We're allowing that trauma to continue as long as we hold on to that.
Yep.
So we have to come to the point, do we want to continue to be hurt? Do we want to continue to allow this person, even though they're not doing anything on a physical level, our memories and us holding on to that, you're actually allowing that trauma to reoccur over and over and over again in a daily life. So letting go and forgiving, it's about you forgiving yourself and letting go.
Yes. You standing, and it's funny because years ago, I remember being so angry at my sister's first husband about the sexual abuse and being furious with him one day, and all of a sudden realizing that, Sarah, what he did to you when you were a little girl, that was not something that was in your control. Allowing that to still control you, that's your choice.
Yep.
You can't be a victim if you choose not to be. And so that was the day that I chose that I was not going to be a victim anymore. Now, did it happen instantaneously? No. again, I've gone through years of work to do it. But I'm here to tell you that the freedom on the other side of this healing journey is so massive that you can't even fathom it. As a matter of fact, the other day, my brother was talking to me about my book. He's a little triggered by it. I think he's kind of afraid of what I'm going to say, and he's always he has not dealt with his own trauma, and I think it put him in a place of fear. But he was saying, well, I think you're worse off now than you've ever been, and I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm off all of my antidepressants. I'm off all my blood pressure medication. I'm better than I've ever been in my whole life. Well, I don't understand what you're talking about. And he said, well, you used to be like really confident and powerful, and you just did whatever you wanted to do. And now you're talking about feeling unloved and unworthy and blah, blah. And I said, oh, okay, I get it now. I understand what the problem is. You actually believed that that person that you've known your whole life was actually a human being. Let me clue you in. That girl that you grew up with and have known your whole life, that was a version of your sister that never existed. That was a lie. It was the Matrix. That was the mask that I put on to keep myself safe in this world. I was tough. I was powerful. I was confident. I didn't give a shit what anybody thought. And you know why? Because people don't mess with people like that.
You need to
They
protect yourself. That was your protective
I,
mechanism.
yep. I said, and now I've understood that it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to let the world, I feel safe in the world so that now I can let people see that I'm not perfect. I'm never going to be perfect. I get scared, I cry, I get angry, I get frustrated. All of those things happen to me, just like they do to you. It's just that I never showed you before. And he was trying to comprehend. I said, okay, here's the best way I know to explain this to you. A year ago, which is when I had that conversation with James, if you would have said to me, Sarah, I don't like you, I would have gone into 4 to 6 weeks of literally all day, every day thinking, I wonder why he doesn't like me. What did I do wrong? Did I say something wrong? How can I fix this? What can I do to make him like me? What's wrong with me? Why can't I? All about what's wrong with Sarah and how do I fix me? And if you said that to me today, I'd go, wow, that's interesting. Because what I have figured out is I don't like coffee, but that doesn't mean there's something wrong with coffee. It's just not my preference. And I promise you that coffee does not sit around going, I wonder why Sarah doesn't like me. Maybe if I change my taste, maybe if I change my aroma. No, coffee is what it is. It just is. And it's okay if I don't like it. It's okay with me and it's okay with the coffee. We don't have to interact
That's
with one
a
another. It's
beautiful
all
way to
cool.
put it. Yes, absolutely.
But
That is.
to live now in a world where I'm like, oh, that's interesting. You don't like me. Okay. Obviously
I
just not
think
your
the
person.
most important thing that you said was, I feel safe, because that's key. That's the place where you want to get to, is where you're okay with who you are at this present moment, no matter what is going on around you.
Yep. And it's funny because, writing this book, although it was very cathartic, now I'm getting ready to release, it's going to be released on January 30th. And I'm getting to that point and realizing that I'm going to share all of my hurts and my brokenness, all the deep stories, things that we haven't even touched on here, all the ugliness. I'm going to share that with the whole freaking world. And it would be really, really easy for them to judge me about that. Really easy. And as I was thinking about that the other day, a friend of mine gave me Shelley, she gave me this definition of freedom that blew my socks off. And I get to share it with y'all because it was the best definition ever had. She said that having freedom is being comfortable with giving you the ability to misjudge me. Isn't that amazing?
That is.
And that is that is the world that I get to live in now, where it's okay. I mean, do I have anxiety? Of course I have anxiety. I'm a human being. But
We're always going to experience those emotions, those sad moments, right?
yeah,
Those moments of anxiety, of really deep sad, like that's part of being human. You're gonna
yeah,
have moments of anger, disappointment. That's what humans are here to experience. The difference is you don't stay with it forever. It
yeah,
comes and it goes. You
yeah,
experience it, you acknowledge it, and it goes away. And you wake up the next morning
yeah.
and you say, okay, here's Sarah's back. I'm over that and I can continue on and go to the next experience.
Yep. So it is, living a life of freedom where, you know what, I really don't care if you like me. I mean, I hope you do. That would be great. I hope we can get along. I would like to be your preference, but if I'm not your preference, or if you judge me in a way that I shouldn't be judged, I'm okay with that.
So,
Your
Sarah,
perception of me doesn't get to control my universe anymore.
absolutely. So, Sarah, tell us about your book. What's the name of the book? When is it coming out? Where people can reach out to get a copy of it?
So the book is titled appropriately, Yeah, Me Too. What He Said That Changed Everything. And yeah, you can order a copy on yeahmetoobook.com. It will be available on January the 30th. And something I'm super, super excited about. I'm going to be doing some launches and things like that. So, if you want to follow me on social media, you can find out about all the goodies that I'm going to be doing beforehand. And even on the day of release, I'm even going to sell it for 99 cents for that day only. So that uh,
Awesome.
e-
And I'll have
even
the
those
link.
people with money, with money
Absolutely.
challenges can get a copy.
Absolutely. And I'll have the link to your website under our podcast. So thank you, Sarah, so much for coming on and sharing your story. I really hope this is going to change quite a lot of people and help them in some way or another. Thank you so much.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me. I have so enjoyed our time together.
Absolutely. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share our videos so that we can touch more people with these wonderful stories. So until next time, thank you.